So this is all what the Pharisees were good at. They loved to judge other people. They loved to play God in their own environment. And the mark of a judgmental person who wants to sub for God is oftentimes anger and hatred. In their mind, God relies heavily upon them. They don't rely on God. God relies on them to fix the problems. They believe they know better than anybody else and what needs to be done to correct all these problems in other people's lives. Just like the Pharisees of old. So how do we avoid becoming like them? How do we avoid making those mistakes? There's 3 principles that can guard us against that plague of Phariseeism that Jesus condemned. Number 1, if we're going to love one another, we need to start by realizing that we are all sinners. Actually, let me check that before we... Is there anybody in here that has not sinned? Okay, good. We are all sinners. Everyone. None of us are perfect. Romans 3:23, for all have sinned and come short of the glory of God. In other words, we're all kind of like that boy that fell in the Special Olympics. Sometimes we fall and we just lay there and we cry because we messed up. Everyone falls short. Every one of us can be criticized. Everyone can be condemned. The person you or I would criticize is the servant of God. And only God has the right to judge that person. Frankly, God is known for his ability for helping the fallen people get up again. Not us. Max Lucado put it this way: can the sick mock the ill? Can the blind judge the deaf? In the same way, can the sinner condemn another sinner? Absolutely not. He goes on to say, be careful. The Peter who denies Jesus at tonight's fire may proclaim him with fire at tomorrow's Pentecost. The Samson who is blind and weak today may use his final strength to level the pillars of godlessness. A shuddering shepherd in his generation may be the mighty Moses of the next generation. Don't call Noah a fool. You may be asking him for a lift. The point is, Christians who are struggling, Christians who have fallen short, they may need time to change. They may need time to realize what God is doing in their lives. And if we become those who judge them and who criticize them and condemn them, we don't give God an opportunity to work in their lives because we are telling them, I'm the God and you're wrong. No, we're wrong. What should we do instead? We also need to come to grips with the fact that not only are we all sinners, but God commands that we love one another. What is the love chapter? Somebody tell me out loud. Love chapter is 1 Corinthians 13. That's right. Now, was Corinth known as a loving church? No. I mean, we think, well, 1 Corinthians, that's to the Corinth church there in Corinth. Obviously, they were a loving church. Well, no, as a matter of fact, they weren't. They were notorious for being selfish, self-righteous, judgmental people. It was a congregation filled with wannabe intimidators of God that Paul had to tell them what love really was like because they didn't know. Love is patient, love is kind, it does not envy, it does not boast. He had to tell them what love was because they weren't fulfilling that love there in the church. Peter put it this way: above all, love each other deeply because love covers a multitude of sin. Proverbs 10 and 12 says it this way: hatred stirs up dissension, but love covers all wrongs. You ever been in a supermarket and you've been walking in a line behind somebody who's got the one little baby that sits there and screams screams and yells and throws fit after fit after fit. Yeah, my kids aren't little enough anymore to sit in that shopping cart. But doesn't it just grate on every... You're just like, could you please just shut that kid up? But when it's our kid, even though they may fuss and scream, and yes, even though we may discipline them because of it, we won't stop loving them. If they begin to cry, we won't stop comforting them and caring for them. Because they're my kids. That love covers a multitude of sin and screaming because of the love. God is essentially telling us, when people in the church throw a fit, which sometimes we will, they're in your shopping cart. They are our family. They belong to us. We need to love them and cover them with that love, because that's what covers the multitude of wrongs. Hatred stirs up dissension. Hatred is the source of backbiting and anger and self-righteousness that God condemns. But true love doesn't hate. It isn't angry and it doesn't backbite. Christian love covers wrong because that's the kind of love that fixes what's broken. It's a love for the fallen. Kind of like the simple childlike love that those 8 had in the Special Olympics when they turned back and they picked up their friend. That's why Jesus said, if your brother sins against you, go to him and show him his fault just between the two of you. If he listens to you, then you have won your brother over. So we need to be careful that our mentality isn't a mentality of judgmentalism, of not being over someone else or more spiritual than someone else, but that we approach them in a heart of love, wanting to help them correct the wrong just between us and fix it and find that loving spirit that covers a multitude of wrongs. I mean, let's say for just an example that Danny has just offended me terribly. Matter of fact, Danny, stand up for just a second. Danny, you have just, you have terribly offended me. You've really, really hurt my feelings. And the way that we sometimes handle this, and man, we need to be really careful of this, because this is what, let me just tell you, this is what the church is notorious for, is as a church, Danny has hurt my feelings, and I say, Jack, can you believe what Danny did to me? It's awful. One too many shots. Terrible. I mean, we just say, John, you heard about that, didn't you? I mean, that broke my heart.
People need to stop looking down on me.
They need to quit. And it's all, I mean, we're talking about this because we love him, right? That's why we're talking amongst ourselves, because we love him. Right? Isn't that careful what we do? Is we love Danny, so we want to talk amongst the group and get this fixed. No.
I won't tell them what's
All right. Thank you, Danny. Danny heard that when I told him I was going to.
Man, it worked.
Now let's be real honest with ourselves, church. Isn't that what we do? We mask it with love. We put over top of it, we're just doing this because we love him. No, you're not. You're wanting to be over him and rule over him in judgment and declare that you are more righteous. So you try to build a coalition of people that will support you. And you're the one that's wrong. This hurts because we've all done this. We have. But But it's not what God says in His Word. He says if someone wrongs you, go to them, just you two. Show love. Danny, love you. Thanks for letting me embarrass you. So do we agree this is what Jesus has called us to do? How many of you believe that if we have a problem with a fellow Christian, we should go to them only and talk to them? Right? So in order to love one another as Jesus tells us to, we really need to realize that we all fall down. That we all fail. We all sin. We need to realize that love means we must try to pick up one another. And lastly, we need to trust God. If I'm going to love others and not judge them in self-righteousness, then I have to be able to wait on God to work in that person's life. I can do my part to love them and to encourage them, but I can't save their soul. That is what God has to do in them. I have to realize that God wants to change them, and He can continue to work on them in ways that I'll never know, in ways I'll never see. In closing, I want to tell a story from a guy named Fred Craddock who told about his father. In reading the story, you get the impression that his dad had been hurt by somebody in church years before. And for years, his son's church reached out to him to come back to the church. But he always rejected their offers to go to church with a single statement. He said, all they want is another name and another pledge. He meant, they don't care about me. All they want is a body and my money. Year after year, pastors, evangelists would all visit this man during revival meetings and during outreach portions, and they would try to get him to come, and he'd repeat the same phrase, and he would dismiss them over and over again with, all they want is another name and another pledge. That's what Craddock's father always said, all except one time. Fred tells of how his father got cancer and finally had to go to the VA hospital to receive proper care. Over a period of time, the once burly man wasted away to a mere 78 pounds. When Craddock made it home and visited him in his hospital, he was shocked by his father's appearance. But he was also shocked by what he saw in that room. The room was filled with flowers and with cards. As Craddock went about the room looking at the flowers and reading the cards, he was stunned by the fact that for the most part, they came from the very members of the church that his father had so long turned away and rejected. His father lay motionless and reached up and waved to him to come to his bedside. He couldn't speak due to the cancer that had captured his body, but he weakly wrote these words on the notepad. Words were from Hamlet. Draw your breath in pain as you tell my story. Craddock said, "What's your story, Dad?" And his father wrote these 3 words. I was wrong. That church loved Craddock's father. And because they loved him, they gave God the opportunity and the time to change a man's heart. All because they didn't condemn, they didn't turn away from him, they didn't refuse him, they just loved him. You can't truly show that kind of love until you understand